What if I told you that port doesn't necessarily mean port, and that mayday originates from a language you would have never guessed? The world of nautical language is full of unique and quirky terms that have stood the test of time for centuries, and once you hear the stories behind them, you'll never see the ocean the same way again. Let's dive into some nautical words. Our list of nautical words today will start with one that dates way before the invention of steering wheels and GPS. In those days, sailors had to have easy ways of describing directions on a ship, especially when the waters grew rough on the high seas. At the very beginning of sailing, vessels were navigated using a steering oar, basically a large paddle that always hung on the right-hand side. Sailors were usually right-handed, and thus, the steering side became the right due to natural affinity. Over time, the Old English word starboard, steering side, came to be replaced by starboard. But what about the left side? Well, if the steering oar was over the right, you couldn't dock or port the ship from that side without a bit of a problem. You'd pull up to the dock on the other side, also known as the port side. Sailors used to originally refer to it as larboard, for loading side, but it sounded too much like starboard in the middle of a storm, so in the 1840s the British Navy officially changed it to port. Much improved. During the 19th century, to avoid collision at night, ships began employing colored lights, red for port, left, and green for starboard, right. Just like traffic lights, red equals stop, so if you observe a ship's red light, you yield and pass safely. Some people even believe that in 1912, when the Titanic collided with the iceberg, there was pandemonium on the bridge caused by these two terms. There are stories about a communication failure between starboard and port that caused the tragedy. One of the officers purportedly bellowed an instruction that was misconstrued in the moment of excitement, so the ship moved in the incorrect direction. These days, port and starboard still matter, especially on massive ships and in the sky. Even airplanes use the same terms when describing their left and right sides. The next time you're cruising or ferrying, impress your friends by simply mentioning the starboard sunset or the port side dolphins. You'll be a salty old sailor, and you'll never be lost on deck again. Back when sailors didn't have fancy sonar to measure the ocean's depth, they used something much more hands-on. The word fathom actually comes from the Old English word fathom, meaning to embrace or to stretch out the arms. Why? Because a fathom was the distance from fingertip to fingertip when you held your arms out, so approximately about 6 feet. Early mariners would throw a weighted rope over the side of the vessel, which had knots in it every 6 feet. By counting how many arm spans, fathoms of rope went beneath the water, they could determine how deep it was. No computers, no calculators, just good old-fashioned measuring by hand. To this day, scuba divers and sailors continue to measure depth in fathoms. So when you hear the wreck is at 20 fathoms, that's 120 feet down. And if you think about it, this term even made its way into everyday use. Today, when we say "I can't fathom it," we mean I can't understand it, because the idea is too deep for us to wrap our heads around. Cool, right? In the 1800s, a British survey ship named the HMS Challenger set out to map the ocean floor, one painstaking fathom at a time. On one of its deepest soundings, they sounded the fabled Challenger deep in the Mariana Trench, an incredible 36,000 feet deep. That's 6,000 fathoms. Just imagine lowering a rope into the water and watching it just keep going for 6,000 arm spans. So the next time you hear a sailor or diver throw out a casual fathom, just picture them opening their arms wide as if to embrace the ocean in a big hug. As it turns out, measuring the mysteries of the deep is merely a matter of arms and a whole lot of patience. Ever wonder why we say a ship sails at 20 knots instead of 20 miles per hour? It's all due to some clever sailors and some very primitive equipment, a rope and a piece of wood. 17th century sailors were curious about how fast their vessels were moving, especially when it came to tricky water conditions, so they got a brilliant idea: to create the log line. This was a rope with evenly spaced knots along it, knotted and secured to a flat piece of wood cut in the form of a wedge of pie. Sailors would toss the wood over the stern, the back of the ship, and let it drag behind. As the ship moved forward, the rope would be unspun. They counted with a sandglass, a kind of small hourglass, how many knots passed through their hands in about 30 seconds. Every knot that passed was about 1 nautical mile per hour. That's right, your velocity was actually measured by counting knots, and so the term knot became the unit of measurement for speed at sea. Knots are handy in the sense they're tied to the nautical mile, which is based on the Earth's circumference. Pilots and sailors alike continue to use knots because it is more naturally tied to global navigation than regular miles. Even World War II pilots did their quick fuel, navigation, and timing calculations all in knots. And there is even an instance of an inexperienced pilot confusing his fuel capacity because he had done everything in plane miles per hour instead of knots. He estimated he had 50 more miles of fuel until the engine started sputtering and fading out over the Pacific. He barely managed to make an emergency landing on a friendly island. As you can imagine, it quickly became a joke in his squadron. Moral of the story, knots aren't just old-fashioned, they can save your life. Now knots bring sailors and flyers together across generations. The next time you're driving down the highway, imagine how you would sound if you said, "I'm traveling at 70 knots. You'd be doing your speed measurement like an old-time explorer, and quite honestly, you would sound much cooler. Did you know about the history of knots? Let us know in the comments below. Of all the strange sailor slang out there, head has to be one of the funniest, and yeah, it is as confusing for you as it is for me. We are talking about the toilet. It originated way back in the earliest sailing ships. In those days, ships had no bathrooms conveniently hidden down below. Instead, the bathroom was just a couple of boards laid over the bow of the ship at the head, the front or bow. Why the front? Because the wind used to blow from the back to the front. By having the toilet in the bow, all the foul smells would be blown off the ship instead of back into everyone's living area. Clever and a little sickening as well. In fact, using the bathroom on the ocean was a balancing act. Imagine trying to squat on a narrow board while the ship swayed and rocked over rough waves. Let's just say you didn't want to lose your target. Even though newer vessels now have full, proper bathrooms, the Navy, the Coast Guard, and most yachties still call the bathroom the head. It's one of those traditions that persisted, like the salty air. There is even an instance of a group of sailors, while sailing across the Atlantic in the 1970s, had foul storms that made it all but impossible to utilize the head. One miserable sailor was seemingly catapulted from the head and into the corridor when in use. His friends taped a warning placard, "Use the head at your own risk." It was a running joke throughout the cruise. The next time you're aboard a cruise ship or at a naval museum, let loose an "excuse me, where's the head?" and see how people react. Instant respect from the sailors and some humorous glances from landlubbers. You'll be officially ship-talking fluent. Mayday, mayday, mayday. It's the noise you never want to hear a vessel or a plane emit, but it's a word that ultimately saves lives. And here's the surprising thing. It has a fascinating, little publicized etymology. Mayday as a term came into use in the 1920s, the golden years of early aviation. Both aircraft and ships were just starting to utilize radio communications back then. Yet something was lacking. There was no single universal term for calling for assistance. You couldn't waste vital time attempting to convey that you needed help. You needed a code term which would alert others immediately. And it is then that Frederick Stanley Mockford, a senior radio officer at London's Croydon Airport, was given the job of devising one. Since so many flights operated across England to France at the time, Mockford wanted to use a term that both English and French people could understand. He recalled the French phrase mayday, an acronym of Venez m'aider, or for non-French speakers, come help me. When it was spoken, mayday was very close to mayday, and it was short and crisp and impossible to confuse with ordinary conversation. Mockford's proposal was adopted, and mayday has been used as an international distress call for radio telegraph and radio telephone transmission since 1927. Standard procedure is to call mayday, mayday, mayday 3 times in succession to guarantee beyond any shadow of a doubt that it gets heard, even over static, chaos, or bad weather. Once, no one might hear it. 3 times, now you've got everyone's ears. In shipping, aviation, and rescue, mayday is still the definitive distress call employed in life or death emergencies. If your vessel is sinking, your aircraft engine seizes, or any situation where lives are in immediate peril, mayday is your call. In less life-threatening emergencies such as mechanical malfunctions or minor injuries, on the other hand, the call pan is used. In 2009, a Canadian pilot's small twin-engine plane suffered a total engine collapse in mid-air on a routine flight. The pilot stayed cool and broadcasted a mayday on the radio. Thanks to his quick thinking and good communication skills, the rescue teams were able to zero in on his location within minutes. He crash-landed into the woods, but due to issuing that mayday so quickly, rescuers reached him before nightfall. He survived with only a broken ankle. There is something reassuring about mayday. Regardless of your language, where you're geographically located in the world, or the catastrophe that has befallen you, when you yell out mayday, someone will attempt to save you. It is a single word that makes us remember that even on oceans and skies that seem limitless, we're never actually alone. And that's all for today. From the fathoms stretched out arms to measure the depths, to mayday shouted out across seas and skies, nautical terms have centuries of high seas adventure, danger, and plain old-fashioned cleverness behind them. What's amazing is that even today, in our satellite and smartphone era, we're still using the same old words to navigate, survive, and communicate with one another. It's a tribute to the fact that no matter how much technology we develop, some traditions are just too good and too smart to leave behind. If you enjoy learning about the real history of these salty terms, make sure to like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments below what nautical term most surprised you. And hey, if you're hungry for more explorations into the hidden history behind common words and traditions, be sure to tune in. We've got a whole ocean of stories in store for you.